It didn't start with words. It started with silence, the kind that feels heavy, like the air itself is waiting to explode. The studio was packed to the walls. Lights glaring off polished cameras. Every lens aimed at two women sitting across from each other under the harsh glow. You could almost hear the audience's hearts pounding, 100 phones raised, recording every second. Social media was already on fire. Hashtag shooting to the top of global trends. Hashtag Judge Judy vs. Karoline. Hashtag truth on trial. Hashtag humiliation incoming. Memes were being made in real time before the first question was even asked. Do you think justice won tonight? Drop your name, city, and country in the comments. Let's see where truth still matters. And if you stand for truth, share this now. And in the middle of this storm sat Judge Judy Takes, her posture perfect, her hands folded neatly on the table. Her face unreadable, but her eyes locked forward with that same cold precision that had reduced courtroom liars to rubble for decades. To anyone watching closely, her stillness wasn't nerves, it was a warning. Opposite her sat Karoline Leavitt, young, ambitious, and dripping with the kind of cocky confidence that only comes from believing the cameras are on your side. She leaned back in her chair, one hand resting casually on her notes, a smirk tugging at her lips. She glanced toward the crowd every so often, as if feeding off their anticipation. To her, this wasn't a discussion, it was a performance, and she planned to steal the spotlight. But Karoline wasn't here just to talk, she was here to win. Her goal was simple: take down the legendary Judge Judy on live television and claim her own viral crown. She wanted that clip, the one that would be played on every news network, the one that would dominate TikTok and Twitter, the one that would make her the woman who humbled Judge Judy. The tension was suffocating. The live audience sat frozen, leaning forward as if they could pull the words out of the air faster. Phones buzzed with incoming notifications. She's about to roast her. One tweet read, "Judge Judy's going to destroy this girl." Another countered. It felt less like a debate and more like a public execution waiting to happen. No one knew yet who would be the executioner. Karoline shifted slightly in her chair, her smirk growing. She had rehearsed this moment for days, memorized her points, and practiced her delivery until it sounded effortless. In her mind, Judy was just another old voice clinging to authority. Someone who wouldn't survive in this new, ruthless era of social media politics. Judy didn't move. She didn't blink. She just watched Karoline.com, and unnervingly still, like a predator conserving energy before the strike. The moderator gave his opening remarks, but no one was listening. The room had already split into two invisible armies. Those waiting for Judy to crush Karoline, and those eager to watch the young challenger topple the queen of courtroom authority. Karoline moved first. She adjusted her microphone, her smirk, now full-blown, and turned slightly toward the cameras, making sure every angle caught her confidence. She was ready to go for the jugular. Judy tilted her head ever so slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to make Karoline hesitate for a fraction of a second. It was subtle, but to anyone watching closely, it was a shit small, but enough to change the energy in the room. Karoline cleared her throat, her voice dripping with practiced sarcasm as she prepared to strike, already imagining the viral clip of her first line. But just as she opened her mouth, Judy leaned forward, slow and deliberate, her gaze locking on Karoline with the same deadly focus that had made witnesses crumble for years. And when Judge Judy finally spoke, her voice calm, but sharp enough to cut glass, the entire room went dead silent, as if every breath, every whisper, every thought had been yanked out of the air in one instant. Because everyone suddenly realized this wasn't going to be a debate. This was going to be a dismantling. The first strike came with a laugh. Not a polite, nervous laugh, but a sharp, cutting one that bounced off the studio walls like broken glass. Karoline Leavitt tilted her head back slightly, letting the laugh linger just long enough for the cameras to catch it. The audience shifted uncomfortably, sensing the deliberate mockery before she even spoke. "Judge Judy," Karoline began, her tone dripping with condescension, "I have to hand it to you, you're brave for even showing up tonight. Most people your age would be at home, enjoying retirement. But you're still out here trying to, quote, lecture the next generation about politics, about integrity." A few people in the audience chuckled, not out of genuine amusement, but because her delivery demanded it. Social media was already reacting in real time, tweets flying, Karoline laughing in her face. Savage. This is gonna get ugly. Karoline leaned forward, resting her elbows casually on the table, her smirk widening. "Look, I respect your legacy in television. Really, I do. But let's be honest, you're a TV personality, not a policymaker. You spent years yelling at people over unpaid rent and stolen handbags. That doesn't exactly qualify you to lecture Americans on the future of this country, does it?" The laughter in the gallery grew louder this time, a few scattered claps joining in. Karoline's smirk brightened as she glanced at the crowd, feeding off their reaction. She wasn't finished. She shifted in her chair, crossing her legs smoothly, projecting the kind of casual dominance that says, "I'm in control here." "You built a brand on humiliating people for ratings. You edited out the boring parts, kept the juicy sound bites, and turned people's real problems into entertainment. And now you want to stand here and pretend you're some moral authority on integrity and justice. Forgive me if I find that hypocritical." A ripple of murmurs moved through the audience. A man in the second row whispered to the woman beside him, "She's going for the throat." Karoline's voice turned sharper now, her tone no longer mockingly sweet but aggressive, cutting. "And let's not ignore the obvious. Her reputation isn't spotless. There have been plenty of accusations over the years about bias, about favoring drama over fairness. You're good at sounding tough, Judge, but sounding tough doesn't mean being right. So, tell us, how many times did you get it wrong and just moved on? Because that's what television judges can do. In politics, in real life, mistakes cost people everything." The crowd buzzed, gasps, and low conversations filling the studio. Social media blew up. "Karoline is ruthless tonight." Judge Judy looked shook. Karoline delivered her final blow with a smirk that bordered on cruel. "So, maybe before lecturing Americans on truth and accountability, you should take a long look at your own record, because if you were held to the same standard you claim to hold others to, we wouldn't even be having this conversation." The crowd stirred, and even a few people clapped awkwardly. Karoline sat back in her chair like she'd already won, her chin slightly raised, her smirk carved into her face as if daring Judy to fight back. But Judy didn't move. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her stillness was unnerving, like a coiled spring waiting to strike. She sat perfectly composed, her hands folded on the table, her eyes locked on Karoline with a calm intensity that made the younger woman smirk, twitch just slightly. And then Judy leaned forward. It was slow, deliberate, every movement controlled. She didn't rush, she didn't need to. Her silence had already shifted the energy in the room, pulling it toward her like gravity. When she finally spoke, her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was calm, even polite, but sharp enough to slice through Karoline's entire performance. "Are you finished, Ms. Leavitt?" Judy asked, her tone so measured it almost sounded condoled. Karoline forced a laugh, but it came out thinner than before. "Go ahead." Judy turned slightly, not to Karoline, but to the audience, her gaze sweeping across them, her tone conversational, almost casual. "It's fascinating, isn't it, how quickly people resort to insults when they don't have substance, how they raise their voices, throw out accusations, hoping no one notices the lack of actual evidence behind their words." The audience murmured, several nodding. Judy's voice stayed steady, her words landing like quiet hammer strikes. "She says I'm not qualified to talk about integrity because I spent my career in a courtroom because I wasn't making laws. I was enforcing them. But here's the difference, Ms. Leavitt. While you were writing sound bites for political campaigns, I was looking real people in the eye, every day, holding them accountable for their lies. And I didn't need to be a politician to know right from wrong." Karoline's smirk faltered, her posture stiffening. Judy turned to her now, her eyes locking on Karoline with a look so sharp it felt like a physical blow. "You talk about my mistakes. Yes, I've made them, because I'm human. But when I got it wrong, I didn't spin it for headlines. I didn't smear people to look powerful. I corrected it, because accountability isn't about perfection, it's about owning the truth, even when it's inconvenient." The audience gasped, someone clapping before quickly stopping, and social media started to turn. Judy just flipped it on her. Karoline's smirk is gone. Judy leaned closer to the microphone, her voice softer now, almost sympathetic, which somehow made it cut deeper. "And you call me a hypocrite for holding people accountable on television. But let's be honest, you built your entire career on outrage. You thrive on it, you manipulate it. The only difference is I did it to protect people. You do it to get attention." Karoline shifted in her chair, her forced smirk now almost completely gone, her hands tightening around her notes. Judy turned back to the audience, fully now, her tone growing stronger, her words ringing with finality. "She says this is about the future of the country. She's right. But the future won't be saved by arrogance. It won't be saved by loud voices drowning out the truth. It will be saved by people who care about facts, not fame." The audience erupted in murmurs, growing louder, some clapping, despite the moderator trying to restore order. Karoline's face flushed, her jaw tightening as she avoided Judy's gaze. And then Judy looked back at her, her final line delivered with quiet, deadly precision. Her voice dropping so low, the entire room had to lean in to hear it. "You wanted a viral moment. Ms. Leavitt, congratulations, you're about to get one, but not the kind you wanted." The room went silent for half a second before erupting in gasps and whispers. Reporters typing furiously, Twitter exploding in real time. Judy just ended her. Karoline's career might be done after this. The silence didn't last long. It never does when someone is losing control. Karoline Leavitt broke it with a sudden, sharp laugh, louder, this time, deliberate, meant to cut through the tension. It echoed across the studio, forcing every eye back to her. She leaned forward, her hands spread on the table, her smirk replaced with something colder, more vicious. "Oh please," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Spare us the lecture. Judge, you're good at sounding noble. I'll give you that. But we all know the truth. You've made a career off tearing people apart for ratings. You humiliated desperate people on TV, and you loved every second of it. Don't act like you did it for justice, you did it for money. The gallery stirred, gasps and low murmurs rippling through the audience. A woman in the front row frowned, shaking her head, but a few claps came from Karoline's supporters scattered in the crowd. Twitter exploded instantly. Karoline's snapping back hard. This just turned savage. Karoline pressed on, her tone sharper now, each word like a blade. And let's talk about that money, shall we? You sit there pretending to care about regular Americans, but you're sitting on hundreds of millions of dollars. Mansions, private jets, staff to do everything for you. You don't know what it's like to worry about rent, or groceries, or medical bills. You can't talk about integrity when you've never had to struggle like the people you claim to care about. The audience murmured louder now, split reactions evident. Some nodded slightly, others looked uncomfortable. Karoline sensed it and went for the kill. She slammed her hand on the table, the sound cracking like a whip. You're not a hero, Judge Judy, you're a brand. You're a product built by editors, producers, and camera crews. And now you're here trying to act like some national moral compass. Please, you're here for the same reason you were on TV, because you love attention. Admit it. The crowd gasped again, a few people whispering to each other, a man muttering, "That's too far." But Karoline wasn't done. Her eyes narrowed, and she twisted the knife further. And you know what's funny? Karoline added, her smirk returning. You talk about accountability, but who holds you accountable? How many people have accused you of being biased, of favoring the people who made for better television? You were judge, jury, and star of your own show. That's not justice, that's arrogance. The room buzzed with whispers. Some clapped nervously, unsure whether they should. Social media went wild. Karoline's destroying her. This is career-ending for Judy. Karoline leaned back finally, crossing her arms, her smirk wider now, almost triumphant. So go ahead, Judge. Keep pretending you're better than everyone else. But the truth is, you've spent your life performing for cameras. And now, you're just giving us another performance. She sat back, breathing heavier than before. But the smugness on her face said it all. She thought she'd won. But Judy didn't even blink. The older woman sat perfectly still for several seconds. The silence, so heavy you could almost hear the hum of the studio lights. Then she moved slowly, deliberately sitting forward with the same icy precision that had made liars crumble in courtrooms for decades. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, quiet, but it carried through the room like a blade slicing through glass. Are you done embarrassing yourself, Ms. Leavitt? Judy asked, her tone polite, almost soft, but every word laced with steel. Karoline stiffened slightly, her smirk twitching for just a second. Go ahead, she replied, trying to sound casual, but her voice betrayed a hint of tension. Judy turned not to Karoline, but to the audience, her gaze sweeping across them with a measured calm that commanded silence. She says, I did it, for money, that I humiliated people for ratings, that I don't understand regular Americans because I'm wealthy. That's quite a story, isn't it? But stories aren't facts. The murmurs in the gallery quieted, all eyes now fixed on Judy. You want facts? Judy continued, her tone sharpening slightly. Here's one. Every person who came into my courtroom agreed to be there. Every case was real. Every judgment was legally binding. People came to me because they wanted justice, because they trusted me to find the truth. And you don't get that trust by lying or chasing attention. You get it by earning it, day after day, year after year. Karoline's smirk faded slightly, her jaw tightening. Judy's eyes shifted to Karoline now, her voice still calm but colder, sharper. You say I don't understand regular Americans because I'm wealthy. Let me tell you something. I wasn't born wealthy. I worked for decades, 6 days a week, fighting through real courtrooms with real people whose lives were torn apart by lies. I earned every penny I have, and if success disqualifies me from speaking the truth in your eyes, then maybe that says more about you than it does about me. The audience gasped, a few claps breaking through before the moderator gestured for quiet. Judy leaned closer to the mic, her voice softening, almost sympathetic, but the softness made it sting even more. And yes, I was tough. I embarrassed people because lying should be embarrassing, cheating should be embarrassing. And if you're defending the idea that holding people accountable is humiliation, maybe you should ask yourself why. Karoline shifted uncomfortably now, her smirk completely gone, her hands tightening on her notes. Judy sat back slightly, her gaze still locked on Karoline, her calmness almost unnerving. You call me a brand. You call me a product. But tonight, Ms. Leavitt, people aren't looking at me. They're looking at you. And they're not seeing a truth teller. They're seeing someone so desperate to win an argument that she's willing to twist the truth to do it. The gallery murmured louder, some clapping openly now, despite the moderator trying to keep order. Social media flipped. Judy's taking control. Karoline looks done. Judy leaned forward one last time, her voice lowering to a near whisper. But it carried through the silence. Every word a hammer strike. You wanted this stage. You wanted these cameras. You wanted this moment. Congratulations, Ms. Leavitt, have it, but after tonight, you won't be remembered for proving a point. You'll be remembered for proving mine. The room erupted gasps, claps, some outright cheers as Karoline sat frozen, her face flushed, her jaw tight, her hand gripping her pen so hard it bent slightly. Judy glanced at her one last time, her expression unreadable, her tone quiet but devastating. And the next move you make, Ms. Leavitt, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that sent a chill through the room, will be the one you regret the most. The gallery went silent for a split second, then roared with whispers and frantic typing from reporters. Twitter hashtags exploding. Hashtag Judy destroys Karoline. Hashtag regret incoming. Hashtag truth wins. Karoline sat frozen, blinking rapidly, and for the first time, she looked genuinely unsure of what to do next. It started with a smile too wide, too practiced, and just a little too long. Karoline Leavitt's smile didn't look like confidence anymore. It looked like desperation trying to wear confidence. As a mask, she leaned forward abruptly, slamming her pen on the table so hard it made a sharp crack that echoed through the studio. The audience flinched at the sound. She wanted control back, and she was willing to claw for it. "All right, Judge," she snapped, her voice louder than before, sharp enough to cut through the murmurs. "You're great at dancing around questions. You talk like a lawyer, you twist things to make yourself look clever. But let's see how clever you really are when I ask you something you can't spin." The tension in the room tightened instantly. Phones raised higher. Twitter was already exploding. Karoline's setting a trap. This is it. She's going for the kill shot. Karoline grabbed a piece of paper, waving it in the air like a weapon. Her tone shifted to a mock-serious voice, almost theatrical. "You keep talking about truth, about holding people accountable. So here's a real-life problem. Judge Judy, the kind that affects real Americans, not just the people you yelled at on TV." She slapped the paper on the table for emphasis, leaning forward until her face was inches from the microphone. A family of 4, earning $38,000 a year, already living paycheck to paycheck, suddenly gets hit with a 3% tax increase to fund one of those government programs you seem to love so much. That's $1,140 a year they don't have. Which do they give up first, their groceries or their rent? The audience murmured, louder this time. Some nodded, others frowned, already sensing the tension. Karoline pressed on, her voice rising, feeding on the anticipation. "You talk about integrity, about fairness. So answer the question, Judge Judy, you stand by taxing struggling families to fund your precious accountability, or do you admit you're out of touch with reality?" She sat back, crossing her arms tightly, her smirk spreading slowly, triumphant. She could almost feel the victory clip being cut for Twitter already. Karoline Leavitt destroys Judge Judy with impossible question. The room buzzed louder. Even some of Judy's supporters looked uneasy, whispering to each other. Social media exploded in real time. "There's no good answer. Judy's trapped." But Judy didn't look trapped. She didn't look angry, or even annoyed. She looked calm in a way that made the entire room lean forward without realizing it. She sat perfectly still for a moment, letting Karoline's smugness hang in the air like a bad smell. Then she tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to make Karoline shift uncomfortably. "That's your challenge?" Judy asked finally, her voice calm but laced with something dangerous, like a blade hidden in silk. Karoline's smirk twitched. "Yes, go ahead. Let's hear it." Judy leaned forward slightly, resting her hands gently on the table. Her posture perfect, her tone so steady it made the audience instinctively quiet down. "First," Judy said, her voice smooth and deliberate, "thank you for showing everyone exactly why you shouldn't be lecturing anyone on policy, because your entire question is built on something that isn't true." The audience murmured, whispers shooting through the room. Judy's eyes locked on Karoline, her calm tone now carrying a subtle sting. "You said a struggling family of 4 would be taxed an extra $1,140 a year under a 3% increase. That's wrong. Not just morally wrong, mathematically wrong. That family wouldn't be taxed at all under the program you're describing, because they don't fall into the taxable income bracket you're talking about. But you didn't mention that, did you?" Karoline's smile faltered slightly, her jaw tightening. Judy pressed harder, her voice sharpening, her words like hammer strikes. "You're asking me to choose between groceries and rent for a family who wouldn't even be affected by the policy. That's not a question. Ms. Leavitt, that's a lie. Or worse, it's ignorance. Which one is it? Did you lie, or did you just not bother to learn the facts?" Gasps rippled through the audience, someone clapping before quickly stopping. Karoline shifted in her seat, her smirk cracking further. But Judy wasn't done. Her voice softened now, almost sympathetic, which somehow made it sting even more. "And you know what's truly insulting about your question?" Judy continued, turning briefly to the audience. "You pretended to care about that family. You used them as a weapon in an argument you didn't even fact-check. You talk about representing regular Americans, but you just proved you're more interested in scoring points than actually helping them. The murmurs grew louder, some outright clapping now, despite the moderator signaling for quiet. Twitter flipped instantly. Judy just turned her own question against her. Karoline looks done. Judy turned back to Karoline, her tone now sharper, colder. You tried to set a trap for me, Ms. Leavitt, but here's the thing about traps, you'd better understand them before you set them, because tonight, the only person you caught was yourself. Karoline's face flushed crimson now, her breathing sharp, her fingers gripping the pen so tightly it bent slightly in her hand. Judy leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering to a near whisper, but every word hit with the weight of a gavel strike. You wanted to make me look foolish, but all you did was show everyone that you don't care about facts. You don't care about truth, you care about winning, and that's exactly why you're losing. The gallery erupted gasps, loud applause, some standing despite the moderator's frantic attempts to quiet them. Karoline sat stiff, her smirk completely gone now, her jaw clenched, her eyes darting nervously as cameras zoomed in on her every twitch. Judy waited for the noise to die down, then leaned back slightly, her expression calm. Her final line delivered, with quiet, devastating precision, and just when everyone thought this was over, Judy paused, letting the silence stretch unbearably long, her eyes still locked on Karoline. I'm not finished with you yet. The room exploded gasps, cheers, reporters typing furiously. Twitter trending instantly with hashtag Judy not finished, hashtag trap backfires, hashtag Karoline crushed. Karoline looked down for the first time all night, her hands trembling slightly, her once confidence shattered completely. It didn't start with words this time. It started with a crack in Karoline Leavitt's mask. Her fingers were trembling just slightly, but enough for the cameras to catch it in close-up. Her notes, once perfectly organized, now sat in a messy pile, pages crumpled from her grip. She licked her lips nervously, forcing a smile that looked more like a grimace. And then, she laughed, but it wasn't the confident laugh from earlier. This one was sharp, strained, the kind of laugh someone uses to cover panic. You know what, Judge Judy? Karoline said suddenly, her voice louder than before, a little too loud. I'm done letting you act like you're untouchable. You're not, you're just another celebrity pretending to be a hero. The gallery stirred, whispers rising like a wave. Social media comments fired off in real time. She's losing it. Karoline's trying too hard now. Karoline leaned forward aggressively, slamming her hand on the table with a loud thud. You sit there calm, collected, acting like you're above me, above everyone. But you're not, you're just better at performing. And that's all this is, a performance. Her voice cracked slightly at the word performance, but she pushed on, her tone growing sharper, her words faster, spilling out like she couldn't stop them. You talk about truth, about integrity, but you've made millions humiliating people who didn't have the power to fight back. And now you're pretending you did it for justice. Don't make me laugh. The audience gasps, a few uncomfortable laughs, but no one was clapping now. They were watching her unravel. Karoline's voice rose higher, cutting through the silence as if sheer volume could win the fight. And don't act like you know what regular people go through. You sit in mansions, flying in private jets, lecturing everyone else about honesty. How would you know what it's like to choose between groceries and rent? How would you know what it's like to struggle to pay medical bills? You don't. You've never struggled a day in your life. A woman in the audience shook her head, whispering to her friend. She's cracking. A man muttered. This is getting ugly. Twitter lit up. Karoline's voice is shaking. She's spiraling. Karoline, sensing the shift, grew louder, almost shouting now. So stop pretending you're the moral authority here. Judge, you're not a hero, you're a brand. A product built for ratings. You talk about truth, but who holds you accountable? No one. And that's why you're scared of people like me, because I'm not afraid to call you out. The room was buzzing now. But it wasn't in Karoline's favor. The whispers were louder, some audience members frowning openly, a few even booing quietly under their breath. Karoline slammed her notes down one last time, breathing heavily, her face flushed. You've fooled people for decades, Judge Judy, but not anymore. Not tonight. You're exposed, and everyone here knows it. She sat back abruptly, crossing her arms, her chest rising and falling quickly, her smirk returning but shaky, unconvincing. And then Judy moved. Slowly, deliberately, she leaned forward, resting her hands gently on the table. She didn't speak immediately. She let the silence stretch, pulling every pair of eyes back to her. The tension was so thick it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. When Judy finally spoke, her voice was calm, steady, but every word hit with the weight of a hammer. Are you finished, Ms. Leavitt? Karoline forced a laugh. Brittle and thin. Oh, I'm just getting started. Judy tilted her head slightly, her gaze locked on Karoline with surgical precision. No, Ms. Leavitt, you're not getting started. You're falling apart. The gallery gasped, a few clapping, despite the moderator's frantic gestures for silence. Judy continued, her voice calm but sharper now. every word like a scalpel. You've spent the last 5 minutes shouting, waving papers, throwing out random accusations because you don't have the facts to back you up. And when people run out of facts, they turn to noise. That's exactly what you're doing. Karoline's smirk twitched, her jaw tightening. Judy pressed harder, turning slightly to address the audience now, her voice growing firmer. She calls me out of touch. She says I don't understand regular Americans. But let me remind you, I spent decades in real courtrooms, with real people whose lives were torn apart by lies. I didn't read about them in policy papers. I didn't use them as props for arguments. I sat across from them, looked them in the eye, and held people accountable for hurting them. The gallery murmured louder, some nodding, a few clapping again. Twitter comments flipped instantly. Judy's taking control again. Karoline looks furious. Judy turned back to Karoline, her gaze sharper than ever. You talk about my wealth, my success, as if that makes me dishonest. Let me tell you something, everything I have, I earned. And I didn't earn it by shouting louder than everyone else. I earned it by being right, by being fair, and by telling the truth, even when people didn't want to hear it, something you clearly don't understand. Karoline's breathing quickened now, her hands gripping the table, her eyes darting nervously toward the audience, who were visibly siding with Judy more with every word. Judy leaned closer to the microphone, her tone softening now, almost gentle, but the softness only made the words hit harder. And you're right about one thing, Ms. Leavitt, this isn't my courtroom. But truth works the same everywhere. And tonight, the truth isn't on your side. Everyone here can see that. Everyone watching at home can see that. And deep down, so can you. The gallery erupted in louder applause now. Some standing, a few cheering, despite the moderator calling for order. Karoline sat stiff, her face flushed, her forced smirk completely gone, her hands trembling slightly as she shuffled her crumpled notes. Judy waited for the noise to quiet, then delivered her final words with devastating calm. You wanted to expose me, Ms. Leavitt, but tonight, you've only exposed yourself. And trust me. Judy paused, her gaze locking on Karoline like a predator on its prey. The final moment of truth hasn't even arrived yet. The room went silent for half a second, then erupted cheers, gasps, frantic typing from reporters as Twitter exploded with hashtag Judy exposes Karoline, hashtag truth not done, hashtag Leavitt meltdown. Karoline sat frozen, her eyes wide, her jaw clenched, visibly fighting to keep her composure as the cameras zoomed in mercilessly, because everyone knew Judy wasn't finished. The real blow was still coming. It started with a sound no one expected, a chair scraping harshly against the studio floor. Karoline Leavitt shot up halfway from her seat, leaning forward like she was about to lunge across the table. Her face was flushed crimson, her jaw tight, and her fingers clenched into fists so tight her knuckles turned white. The audience gasped collectively, the cameras zooming in instantly, capturing every twitch of her unraveling composure. Enough, Karoline barked, her voice cutting through the room like shattered glass. She forced a laugh immediately after, but it was high-pitched, shaky, the kind of laugh that exposes nerves rather than hides them. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and let you keep pretending you're some hero. Judge Judy, you're not. You're a fraud. The gallery stirred nervously, a ripple of murmurs spreading like a wave. Some audience members frowned, others whispered to each other, and Twitter was already blowing up. Karoline's losing it live. She just snapped. Karoline slammed her hands on the table, the sound echoing sharply. You want to talk about truth? Fine, let's talk about it. You've been wrong more times than you'll admit. You've been biased. You've humiliated innocent people just to look tough. And now you're sitting here acting like you're the moral standard for the entire country. Please, you're no better than the politicians you pretend to criticize. Her voice was rising now, every word spilling faster, harder, like she was trying to drown out the audience's reaction with sheer noise. And don't you dare sit there and talk about accountability when you've spent your life untouched by it. Karoline snapped, her hand shaking as she pointed at Judy. You've made millions off people's pain. And now you're sitting in a TV studio, lecturing Americans about integrity. You don't get to do that. Not anymore. A few gasps rippled through the audience, but it wasn't admiration anymore, it was discomfort. A man in the second row shook his head, whispering to his friend, "She's lost it." Karoline pressed harder, ignoring the growing tension, her voice almost shouting, "Now, this debate is meaningless. People at home don't care about your clever words or your fancy speeches. They care about action, and you've done nothing. Nothing. You're a performer, Judge Judy. That's all you've ever been. And I'm done letting you sit there acting like you're better than me." She slammed her papers on the table, scattering them like confetti, breathing heavily as if she had just sprinted a mile. Her forced smirk returned, shaky, unconvincing, but she sat back as if she had landed the final blow. The room buzzed with tension, a mix of gasps and murmurs, but no applause followed. The energy had shifted completely, and then Judy moved. Slowly, deliberately, the kind of movement that commands attention before a single word is spoken. She leaned forward, resting her hands lightly on the table. Her posture perfect, her eyes locked on Karoline with the kind of unblinking intensity that makes people look away. She didn't speak immediately. She let the silence stretch, pulling the tension tighter, letting Karoline sit there with her shaky smirk as the weight of the room turned against her. When Judy finally spoke, her voice was calm, quiet, but it cut through the room sharper than Karoline's entire shouting match. "Are you finished, Ms. Leavitt?" Karoline forced another laugh, brittle and defensive. "Go ahead, Judge, say something clever. That's all you're good at." Judy tilted her head slightly, her voice soft, almost sympathetic, which somehow made the moment even more dangerous. "No, Ms. Leavitt, I'm not going to say something clever. I'm going to say something true, something you've been running from this entire night." The gallery leaned in instinctively, the silence so heavy you could almost hear the sound of pens scratching as reporters typed furiously. Judy's voice grew stronger now, still calm, but every word landing like a hammer. "You say, I'm a fraud. You say, I've made mistakes. You're right about one thing, I have made mistakes. Because I'm human. But here's the difference between us. Ms. Leavitt, when I made mistakes, I owned them. When I got something wrong, I faced it. I didn't shout louder. I didn't twist the truth, and I didn't attack people to cover for it. I faced it." Gasps swept through the gallery. A woman clapped despite the moderator's attempt to keep order. Twitter lit up. Judy's taking control again. Karoline's dead silent. Judy turned fully toward the audience now, her voice rising slightly, commanding. "She says this debate is meaningless. The people don't care about truth, that they only care about action. But that's the most dangerous thing she's said tonight, because action without truth destroys lives. And that's exactly what we've seen tonight. Noise, arrogance, excuses, and zero accountability." The audience began clapping louder now, some people standing, nodding, cheering. Judy turned back to Karoline, her gaze sharper than ever, her tone now cold, deliberate, each word like a verdict being read. "You say, I'm just a performer. But look around this room, Ms. Leavitt. Look at these people. Look at how they're reacting to you. They're not seeing a fighter for truth. They're seeing someone exposed. Someone who lost because she didn't have the facts on her side." Karoline shifted uncomfortably, her forced smirk completely gone now, her breathing quickening, her hands trembling slightly as cameras zoomed in close. Judy leaned forward, lowering her voice now, almost whispering, but the quiet only made her words more powerful. "You wanted to humiliate me, but tonight, you've humiliated yourself. Because truth doesn't need to shout, Ms. Leavitt. Truth stands still and lets arrogance destroy itself. And that's exactly what you've done." The gallery erupted into a thunderous standing ovations, whistles, reporters typing furiously as hashtags exploded across social media. Hashtag Judy, mic drop. Hashtag Karoline crushed. Hashtag truth wins. Karoline sat frozen, her face pale, her jaw tight, her hands gripping the table as if she could anchor herself against the weight of what had just happened. Judy waited calmly for the noise to settle, her expression unreadable, and then she delivered her final line with devastating quiet, her gaze never leaving Karoline's. And that's when the real shock came next. The room fell silent instantly, every camera zooming in, every audience member holding their breath, because everyone knew Judy wasn't done. Something even bigger was coming. It didn't end with words, it started with an eruption. Karoline Leavitt's chair screeched so violently against the studio floor that half the audience flinched. She shot up, clutching her crumpled notes in a trembling fist, her face a furious shade of red. Cameras zoomed in instantly, capturing her heavy breathing, her eyes darting wildly as if looking for an escape that wasn't there. "You know what?" Karoline snapped, her voice sharp, almost cracking. "I'm not staying here for this circus. You people can clap for her all you want, but this isn't truth, it's entertainment. She's just better at fooling you than I am." Gasps rippled through the gallery, followed by a wave of whispers. Someone in the front row muttered, "She's losing it." A man farther back said louder, "Sit down and face it." And a few people outright booed. Karoline whipped around to glare at the audience. "Oh please, go ahead, cheer for your hero. You'll see soon enough she's no better than the rest of them." Her voice cracked on the last word, and the cameras caught it in high definition. And then, in a move that sent the room into stunned silence, she tossed her notes onto the table, turned sharply, and stormed off stage, the sound of her heels clicking angrily against the floor echoing through the studio. The audience exploded cheers, whistles, even laughter. Twitter caught fire instantly. Hashtag Karoline storms out. Hashtag meltdown live. Hashtag Judy wins. Clips of Karoline's furious exit were already trending before she even made it to the backstage curtains. Judy didn't move during any of it. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded on the table, her expression calm, almost serene, as if she'd expected this from the start. She waited patiently for the noise to settle, her eyes fixed forward, her breathing steady, a living contrast to Karoline's chaotic retreat. When the cheers began to die down, Judy leaned forward slightly, her calm composure commanding the room without a single raised hand. Her voice, when she spoke, wasn't loud, but it carried. Sharp and clear, every word sinking deep into the silence. Ladies and gentlemen, what you just saw wasn't about me. And it wasn't about Ms. Leavitt, not really. It was about something bigger, something that matters far more than a debate. The audience quieted instantly, leaning in, hanging on her words. Even the moderators stayed silent now, sensing the weight of what was coming. Tonight, you witnessed what arrogance does when it's exposed to truth. It yells, it deflects, it insults, and, eventually, it runs. Judy's tone was calm but cutting, her words deliberate, leaving no room for misunderstanding. A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. Some clapped softly, nodding. Judy's voice softened slightly, turning almost reflective, and she glanced toward the audience before locking eyes with the cameras. Integrity isn't about never making mistakes. I've made them plenty. But integrity is about owning those mistakes, standing by the truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs you something. Because when you build your life on arrogance and manipulation, it all comes crashing down the first time someone asks you for proof. The crowd clapped louder now, a growing wave of applause, some people standing again, despite the moderator, signaling for quiet. Judy leaned back slightly, but her eyes stayed locked on the cameras, her tone softening further, almost personal now, as if she were speaking directly to each person watching at home. And here's the part that matters. To you, she said, her voice steady but warm. We live in a time where people think the loudest voice wins, where facts take a backseat to feelings, and where too many are willing to lie if it gets them applause. But I promise you, truth always wins in the end. It might not be loud, it might not be flashy, but it wins. Because truth doesn't need to scream, it stands, it waits, and it never wavers. The gallery erupted again, the applause louder than before, whistles and cheers filling the room. Reporters typed furiously, Twitter hashtags multiplying by the second. Hashtag truth wins, hashtag Judy for justice, hashtag accountability matters. Judy waited for the noise to settle, then leaned closer to the microphone, her tone turning quiet again, almost conspiratorial, pulling every listener in. So, let me ask you something, she said, her gaze fixed on the camera, like she was staring straight into people's living rooms. Do you think justice was served here tonight? Did you see the power of truth for yourself? Tell me. Leave your name, your city, your country, in the comments. I want to know. Where people still believe that truth matters. The gallery murmured, approvingly, nodding, phones already out to type. Judy's final words dropped even lower now, almost a whisper, but they carried through the room like the strike of a gavel. And if you believe in standing up for truth even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you something, share this. Because truth is only as strong as the people willing to fight for it. And tonight, she paused, her eyes narrowing slightly, her voice dropping to a razor-sharp finish. Tonight was just the beginning. The real shock is still coming. The crowd erupted again, louder than ever before, a full standing ovation sweeping across the room. Cameras zoomed in close on Judy's calm, unshaken face as Karoline's furious exit replayed on the big screens. The contrast between the two women telling the entire story in a single split-screen shot. And somewhere backstage, Karoline Leavitt's muffled voice was caught on a hot mic snapping at her team, slamming something against the wall already, feeding the next wave of viral headlines.